Welcome to Ministry Shift. This is a program which we began during lockdown. We were doing it pretty much every week at that point, but now it only pops up occasionally when we feel there's something important for us to reflect upon and consider in terms of our ministerial practice. And this episode is such a one when we have something important to bring to your attention and to share with you and hopefully get some engagement with. And just to say that I'm Matthew Parker, Bishop of Stafford. I'll introduce our guests in a moment, but a little bit about the theme of this edition of Ministry Shift. We're going to be thinking about forces that enable us to work with our churches on the subject of reconciliation, very much at the heart of the Christian faith. We're reconciled to God in Christ, and in Christ we're reconciled to one another. And in practical terms, what does that mean in our communities, our parishes, and how can we become better at it? And we have two guests who can help us with that. So I'm delighted to welcome to Ministry Shift Emma Crick and Christopher Landau. And I'm going to ask them to say a little bit about who they are, and then we'll get into the meat of our discussion in a moment. But Emma, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, you said my name so beautifully, so thank you for that. I work with Coventry Diocese as a reconciliation enabler, and I work there, but also for the wider West Midlands, and that is because I'm also part of Archbishop Justin Welby's reconciliation team. And I work specifically with Difference, which is a resource we'll be talking about today.
Thank you, Emma. And Christopher?
Yes, so I'm the director of Resource, which is a renewal charity which works nationwide, but is actually based in Telford. So I'm pleased to be part of the diocese, live in Telford with my wife and 3 children.
Brilliant. Welcome to you both. Let's, before we get on to the courses that you're championing in this program, let's just look at that theme of reconciliation. And I wonder, Emma, why you think it's particularly timely that we are addressing this issue at the moment.
Yeah, well, I think it's very much a shared reality of us all, where we live in a world which is diverse, complex, and often divided. And there is much room there for deeper learning and even greater depth of love. And we see it and we experience it, but we need to be honest about our state and the state of the world.
Thank you. And Christopher, I wonder whether you feel post-pandemic is also a particular moment.
Well, I certainly think for a lot of churches, there have been things that perhaps have kind of festered away that are now coming to the surface. And people are perhaps naming things that they didn't name during the pandemic. And I think for me, John 13:35 has always been such a foundational text. By this, you'll know that they are my disciples. See how they love one another. And I think the recovery of that mutual love within the church is so vital if we then have good news to share with the wider world.
And the course, Christopher, that you've devised and created is the Unity course. Do you want to tell us a little bit about it?
Yes, so it's based around this book called Loving Disagreement, which is based on my own doctoral work on disagreement among Christians, and really what the New Testament has to say about that theme of how we face those inevitable disagreements. And so the publishers asked whether I would also consider creating a 5-week course. The book has 2 parts, 5 chapters looking at the biblical material, and then 5 chapters considering how we actually apply that in our own lives, and going through a kind of process of, first of all, our thinking, then our praying, our worshipping life, and then finally our writing and our speaking, and what it is to be unifiers and peacemakers. So it's very much looking at what it is as an individual Christian, and then within the life of a local church, facing inevitable disagreements, but doing that with the love that should be at the very heart of the Christian faith.
Thank you. And Emma, the Difference course clearly we'll cover some of those issues and similar ground. But perhaps just to help us understand the difference between the two courses, are there distinctive emphases you'd like to sort of pick up and make clear to us from what Chris said?
I mean, certainly. I mean, it's I would say difference is very much got an emphasis on spiritual formation. So it asks the question around how we want to be as Jesus followers and who we want to be. So when we see Jesus modeling being the primary peacemaker, how do we follow in his footsteps in our everyday life, in everyday spaces and relationships? And so in the difference course, we look very much around our habits and how we operate as individuals, but also how do we look at our communities? What do we like to live with? And so it has a very holistic emphasis to it, where we look at everyday practice. And indeed, we will be touching quite a few things that Christopher just mentioned.
So it's I mean, a question to both of you in a way, perhaps Emma first. Is the emphasis primarily on the relationships within the Christian community, or is it a kind of sense of which this is about community in general? And
well, it's very much so asking you the questions, where are you and who are you relating to? And so it is very much, it starts very much with a vision and a call that being a reconciler is the call on everybody. And that's not just for Christians alone, but as Jesus followers, we hold a particular calling within that because of Jesus. And so could you repeat your question for a minute?
Yeah, it was really just how much is it a church focused course? How much is the focus more widely drawn in terms of, you know, the communities we live in, the villages, town streets, neighborhoods, and so on?
Yeah, I mean, when you're within a difference course session, you are very naturally thinking about all the relationships you're involved with. So yes, it does ask you to think about your church and what you're like as a church and how you are a peacemaking presence or not. But it just as much asks you, what is your presence in your neighborhood? What are you like at work, in your family? And really asking some of those hard questions and having time to go through reconciliation practices so that it becomes really concrete and part of who you are.
And is that true for you too, Chris, in the Unity course? Kind of
I would say the Unity course is more unashamedly, if you like, focused on the quality of life within the church. Really to say, actually, until those challenges have been faced and resolved, often if you haven't secured the mutual love within the church, actually the ministry to the wider community isn't going to be as effective. Or conversely, I think one of the challenges is that we often find it easier to love the person who may have no faith or may follow a different faith but comes to the food bank than we do to love the person within our church who we disagree with on a hot button issue, or indeed we disagree about something like, should we replace the pews with chairs or should we get some new chairs? I actually ground quite a lot of it in an ongoing saga about chairs, because I often think it's those kinds of things where actually Christian life gets poisoned and we end up relating to each other with nothing that would show that we were anything other than, you know, like the Bowls Club or the Amateur Dramatic Society or whatever, rather than believing that actually at the heart of Christian tradition, there are real gems for how we should be relating to each other. And for me, the fruit of the Spirit is absolutely key to that, and what it is to, if you like, apply a kind of fruit of the Spirit test to each disagreement that you're facing, even if it's about, you know, should we charge for biscuits after the Sunday morning service or whatever?
Thank you. So, Emma, what sort of issues might a church be facing that makes it feel that the difference course is the right course for them? What might be the sort of issues they'd want to tackle? What would they be? Why might they say yes? The answer is the answer is never a thing, but a course, never quite the answer. But you know, that difference will help us with this.
Yeah, I mean, so that's a two-parter there. So one, you know, when you come into a session, you are very much bringing the stories from your context. You're bringing your experience into the material when you're doing the Bible study, when you're going through the questions, when you're going through the reconciliation practices. But there are indeed, like, I can give you several examples of why people might approach difference. And just to give you a few examples, really, one group I'm thinking of, they were very much aware of intergenerational tensions in their church, and they wanted to create spaces for storytelling and listening, as well as raising voices so people could speak authentically. And they were drawn to the language of the 3 reconciling habits, which are the key learning from the course, as a way to equip their community to do some of that storytelling and deep listening. And another group I'm thinking of, they wanted to raise issues of racial justice, and they wanted to get their community to start talking about it. And so they, again, wanted to have a shared language and a practice that became sort of the grounding for starting to approach that, especially in the early stages.
Thank you. I mean, this is in both cases a 5-week course, fits very neatly, of course, into to Lent, and but could be used at other times of the year. It goes without saying. It's a good length of time, 5 weeks. But how do you kind of embed the practices and habits that you've been speaking about? I mean, Christopher, how do people take it on and make it part of the lifeblood of a church?
I think it is about trying to establish those habits that Emma is talking about, and it's why we use the language of a kind of fruit of the spirit test, for example, to whenever a particular issue comes along, to actually think, well, am I showing love or patience or peace in the way that I'm choosing to approach this disagreement? And it's very much about saying, of course, there will be disagreements in the life of the church, but it's how we approach them that needs to change. And I think often it's almost as if we've become addicted to disagreeing in really cancerous ways, actually, in relation to the health of the body of Christ. And instead, we need to bring love to its rightful place within the church as well as beyond it.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I mean, Emma, does that resonate with you, that the habits thing is very strong, I think, in the course material for the difference course? I mean, people are practicing it as they're going along and hopefully are developing that. So it takes beyond Lent to Easter. And
it's very much allows both the individual to look at their personal posture as well as a group to be looking at how can we have this as a long-term practice that is part of our shared gathering spaces. So one of the beautiful outcomes that sometimes happens outside when a difference course is finished is when those habits and the language and the practice are then showing in the gathering spaces that already exist. They become part of the church's life. And that is really perhaps one of those fruits of the spirit moments that Christopher was referring to.
Thank you, both of you. Thank you to Emma and to Christopher. The Unity and Difference course, there's a great deal of detail about this on our Darsten website. So if your parish or community want to use it, then there is plenty of ways in which you can find out the details. Thank you very much for watching, and until Ministry Shift returns again, goodbye.